For 3 centuries, they ruled the largest empire on Earth, a domain stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from the Arctic wastes to the borders of Persia. And though they called themselves servants of God, they truly lived as gods among men. Indeed, the double-headed eagle of their dynasty gazed both east and west, presiding over a realm of unimaginable wealth and desperate poverty, of glittering palaces and primitive villages. For generations, they stood as Europe's most powerful autocrats, their word law across 11 time zones. But beneath the gilt and grandeur, forces gathered that would sweep away not just a dynasty, but an entire world. In the end, those who could own anything lost everything: their power, their palaces, and even their lives. What follows is their legacy, an empire built on dreams and destroyed by nightmares. When we think of empires, people said the sun would never set upon. The British Empire attempted to hold the top spot. And yet, what if we were to tell you that there was an empire so vast that quite literally the sun shone over its territories 24 hours a day across 11 time zones? Indeed, for over 3 centuries, one family, the Romanovs, ruled this endless expanse as their personal domain, transforming from medieval nobodies into masters of 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. Yet this ultimate success story would culminate in the most brutal family execution in modern history, as the dynasty that once claimed descent from Caesar met their end in a basement bloodbath that shocked the world. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we explore the rise and fall of the Romanov family. When dawn broke over the Pacific coastline of the Romanov Empire, Nicholas II ruled lands where the sun was simultaneously setting on Polish territories 6,000 miles to the west. An empire so vast that it existed in perpetual daylight. This was the scale of Romanov dominion, an empire so vast it encompassed 11 time zones from Warsaw to Vladivostok, containing 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. Within this immensity, Nicholas commanded a personal fortune that historians estimate between $250 and $300 billion in today's currency. This staggering sum represented not merely wealth, but the complete ownership of an empire where the distinction between ruler and state had dissolved entirely. Unlike modern billionaires who accumulate shares and securities, the Romanovs possessed something far more absolute. They owned Russia itself. Ministers approached the Tsar for funds to run their departments, never the reverse. The entire imperial treasury operated as an extension of the monarch's personal accounts. Consider the scale of their commemorations. In 1913, Nicholas commissioned 2,000 individual Fabergé objects solely as gifts for guests attending his dynasty's tercentenary celebration. Each piece represented months of master craftsmanship, yet they were distributed like party favors at history's most expensive anniversary gathering. The Winter Palace sprawled along St. Petersburg's Neva River across 233,345 square meters, containing 1,500 rooms. Its Baroque magnificence featured 1,886 doors and 1,945 windows, each opening a testament to imperial ambition. Foreign diplomats ascending the Jordan staircase found themselves overwhelmed by calculated grandeur designed to diminish and impress in equal measure. Peter the Great had established this tradition of overwhelming magnificence when he transformed himself from Tsar to emperor through sheer force of will. He didn't merely rule Russia, he reconstructed it entirely, founding St. Petersburg in a swamp and declaring it would rival Paris and London. The imperial crown itself contained 4,936 diamonds, totaling 2,858 carats, topped by a red spinel the size of a hen's egg. Within the crown sparkled the legendary Orloff diamond, 189 carats of crystallized perfection, allegedly stolen from a Hindu temple's idol. Catherine Palace housed the Amber Room, 6 tons of Baltic amber and gold leaf, creating walls that glowed like captured sunlight, valued at $142 million before its wartime disappearance. 50 Fabergé eggs emerged from the imperial workshops over the decades, each a universe of jeweled mechanical perfection that required a year to complete. Nicholas II's personal annual allowance of 200,000 rubles could have fed entire Russian provinces for decades. Yet this golden empire harbored a fatal weakness in the form of Empress Alexandra, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, whose German blood would prove politically toxic during the Great War. Her desperate faith in Grigory Rasputin, the Siberian mystic who claimed to heal her hemophiliac son, created scandals that corroded imperial authority like acid on gold. The imperial garage swelled with so many automobiles that finance ministers formally protested the Tsar's automotive enthusiasm as fiscally irresponsible. Alexandra's increasing isolation and reliance on Rasputin transformed the Winter Palace into a gilded fortress against reality itself. The family continued commissioning treasures and hosting balls, while revolutionary fervor spread through their empire like flames through dry timber. But to understand how a dynasty that claimed descent from Julius Caesar could crumble so completely, we must first trace their ascent from a medieval nobody named Andrei Kobila. The Romanov dynasty's true origins began with Andrei Ivanovich Kobila, a boyar who served the Muscovite court during the 14th century and died sometime after 1347. Historical chronicles mention Kobila exactly once, in 1347, when Simeon of Moscow dispatched him to Tver to escort Simeon's bride, daughter of Alexander Mikhailovich of Tver. This single documented appearance would prove more significant than all the battles and treaties of his era combined. Earlier, genealogical claims insisted that Kobila arrived in Moscow in 1341 from Prussia, where his supposed father, Glander Kambila, had earned fame resisting the Teutonic Knights. Teutonic order records do reference a rebel named Glander, lending slight credibility to this carefully constructed narrative. But by the late 17th century, after the Romanovs had secured the throne, their modest origins no longer sufficed. A fictional genealogy emerged claiming that Andrei Kobila descended from Julius Caesar himself, transforming a minor boyar into the heir of Rome's greatest conqueror. This fabrication revealed how ruling families reconstruct their histories to match their contemporary status, creating mythological origins that justify their authority. The transformation from Kobila to Romanov occurred through calculated marriages and political maneuvering across multiple generations. Roman Yuryevich Zakarian Koshkin, who lived from approximately 1500 to 1543, served as the crucial link in this metamorphosis. Roman held positions as a kolnichi and voivode during the 1530s, ranks that placed him just below boyar status in the Russian nobility. His daughter, Anastasia Romanovna, accomplished what generations of ambitious nobles had failed to achieve. She married Ivan IV, known to history as Ivan the Terrible. This marriage established the family's direct connection to the ruling Rurik dynasty and created associations that would echo through Russian history. Anastasia's reputation for honesty and decency during Ivan's violent reign stood in stark contrast to the brutality surrounding her. Roman's son Nikita Romanovich served as general, statesman and courtier under his brother-in-law Ivan the Terrible. Significantly, Nikita refused to serve with the Oprichniki, Ivan's organization that suppressed opposition through systematic violence. This moral stance, combined with his sister's sterling reputation, established the Romanov family as symbols of relative moderation during Russia's darkest era. Nikita's children became the first Russians to use the surname Romanov, derived from their grandfather Roman through the patronymic Romanovich. The time of troubles, lasting from 1598 to 1613, created both the opportunity and the threat that would define the family's destiny. When Fyodor I died childless in 1598, the Rurik dynasty ended and Russia plunged into 15 years of civil war and foreign intervention. Boris Godunov, who seized the throne, viewed the Romanovs as dangerous rivals due to their connection to the previous dynasty. In 1601, when the future Tsar Michael was merely 5 years old, Godunov accused his father, Fyodor Nikitich Romanov, of treason. The family faced forced separation, monastic vows, and constant threat of execution as Russia descended into chaos. Young Michael Romanov spent his childhood in effective exile, hidden from political persecution while pretenders and foreign armies ravaged the country. But the very instability that threatened to destroy the Romanovs would ultimately deliver them to heights their boyar ancestor Kubila could never have imagined. The Zemsky Sobor of 1613 convened in Moscow with 700 delegates representing every social class in Russia, tasked with selecting a ruler from the wreckage of the time of troubles. On February 21st, after weeks of deliberation, they chose 16-year-old Michael Romanov as their compromise candidate. One boyar allegedly declared the quiet part aloud. "Let us have Misha Romanov, for he is young and not yet wise. He will suit our purposes." Michael was discovered at the Apatyev monastery near Kostroma on March 24th, living in obscurity with his mother Martha. His mother protested vehemently, stating that her son was too young and tender for so difficult an office. The coronation took place on July 21st, 1613, marking both Michael's 17th birthday and the formal end of Russia's near-death experience. Moscow itself lay in such ruins that the new Tsar had to wait weeks at the Troitsa monastery, 75 miles away, while suitable accommodation was prepared in the devastated capital. Michael's first crucial accomplishment involved expelling the foreign armies that still occupied vast swathes of Russian territory. The Peace of Stolbovo, signed February 17, 1617, resolved the Swedish occupation through payment of 20,000 rubles in exchange for the return of Novgorod and other northern territories. More significantly, the Truce of Dulino on December 1, 1618, ended the Polish War and secured the release of Michael's father, Filaret, from captivity. Filaret's return transformed the nature of Michael's reign as the experienced patriarch became the effective ruler of Russia until his death in 1633. This dual leadership structure provided stability while Michael gradually developed his own capabilities for governance. Under their combined leadership, Michael modernized the Russian military, transforming an army dominated by cavalry with bows, swords, and spears into forces incorporating gunpowder weapons. The government began building buffer zones with European states by creating strategic alliances with the Cossacks in Ukraine. Mass creation of new order regiments, reiters, soldiers, dragoons, and hussars, began in earnest, incorporating European military techniques. The administration hired large numbers of European military specialists, demonstrating selective adoption of Western expertise while maintaining orthodox traditions. By the end of Michael's reign, Russian explorers had reached the Pacific Ocean at the Sea of Okhotsk, completing one of history's most remarkable territorial expansions. The conquest of Siberia proceeded through Cossack expeditions, commercial companies seeking fur-rich territories, and Orthodox missionaries spreading both faith and imperial control. Fur trade revenues from these vast new territories provided crucial income for the reconstructing Russian state. Filaret reformed church administration, instituted programs to establish divinity colleges in each diocese, and created libraries to upgrade theological scholarship across the empire. His ecclesiastical policies strove to minimize Roman Catholic influence, decreeing that all Latin Christians entering the Russian Orthodox Church must be rebaptized. The Patriarch sponsored social legislation to stabilize peasant farmers, reformed the tax structure, and reorganized military administration. Michael's government offered concessions and amnesties to rebel groups, incorporating former Cossacks and bandits into the Russian army rather than pursuing endless suppression. Financial stabilization proved more challenging than military victories, requiring new taxation systems and negotiated loans to fund essential state functions. The partnership between secular and religious authority created unprecedented concentration of control while blurring traditional boundaries. But as Michael aged and produced heirs, including his son Alexis, born in 1629, the seeds of future crisis were already germinating in the very reforms that had saved Russia. Alexis ascended to the throne at age 16, following Michael's death in 1645, becoming the first Tsar to sign laws on his own authority. His 31-year reign would witness both tremendous territorial expansion and devastating internal rebellions that nearly destroyed everything his father had built. The Sobornoye Ulogenie of 1649 strengthened bonds between autocracy and lower nobility while legally defining serfdom for centuries to come. This comprehensive legal code formally established the system of bonded labor that would persist until the 1860s, creating both stability and seething resentment. The Salt Riot of 1648 erupted when the government replaced various taxes with a universal salt tax that drove up prices of this crucial preservative. Up to 10,000 people took part in the civil unrest, forcing Alexis to exile his advisor, Boris Morozov, and convene the assembly that produced his landmark legal code. Salt was essential for preserving fish, a staple of the Russian diet, making the tax particularly devastating for common people. The Copper Riot of 1662 demonstrated how military expenses created economic instability when the government issued copper money in large quantities and equated it with silver. Mass production of counterfeit copper money involved some government officials themselves, while insurgents demanded the surrender of traitors and steps to stabilize the economy. But these urban uprisings paled before Stenka Razin's rebellion of 1670 to 1671, the most serious internal threat faced by the early Romanov dynasty. Razin, born into a well-to-do Don Cossack family, captured Tsaritsyn, Astrakhan, Saratov, and Samara, while promising to free the people from boyar rule. His forces attracted escaped serfs, Kalmyks, and various disaffected groups seeking to establish a Cossack republic along the entire length of the Volga. Razin's capture and public execution on June 16, 1671, involved quartering on Moscow's Bolotnaya Square. Some sources describe how he allegedly shouted at his brother to "shut up, dog," when the brother offered to inform on other rebels. The bloody reprisals carried out by the Tsarist regime only strengthened popular resentment against autocratic rule. Yet the most enduring controversy of Alexis's reign involved the schism in the Russian Orthodox Church that permanently split Russian Christianity. Alexis sided closely with Patriarch Nikon during implementation of unpopular liturgical reforms aimed to establish uniformity between Greek and Russian church practices. The reforms triggered massive resistance from traditional believers who became known as Old Believers, creating divisions that would persist for centuries. Patriarch Nikon's violent temper and authoritarian inclinations earned him many enemies, ultimately leading to his disgrace despite Alexis's initial support. The Tsar became estranged from Nikon while retaining the controversial reforms, creating a compromise that satisfied neither traditionalists nor reformers. Opponents of the reform were excommunicated, but Old Believer communities persisted and contributed to popular uprisings throughout the late 1600s. Alexis married twice, producing 16 children from both unions, though child mortality remained devastatingly high. His first wife, Maria Ilyinichna Miloslavskaya, bore 13 children between 1648 and 1669 before dying shortly after the last birth. His second marriage to Natalia Kirillovna Narishkina in 1671 produced 3 additional children, including the future Peter the Great. Sofia Alexeyevna, Alexis's eldest daughter, received an exceptionally good education from the Belarusian monk Simeon Polotsky that prepared her for unprecedented future responsibilities. Following her brother Fyodor III's death in 1682, Sophia became regent of Russia from 1682 to 1689 during the minority of her half-brothers Ivan V and Peter I. The succession crisis revealed dynastic vulnerabilities created by high child mortality and complex family relationships, as Fyodor had no surviving children despite marrying twice. This crisis triggered the Moscow Uprising of 1682 and set the stage for a transformation that would either modernize Russia forever or tear it apart completely. The Romanov dynasty's unraveling began with Russia's humiliation in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, when Nicholas II dismissed Japanese capabilities as yellow monkeys. The loss of Port Arthur and the destruction of the Baltic fleet at Tsushima shattered the myth of Russian invincibility and fueled domestic dissent across the empire. This pattern of fatal underestimation repeated itself catastrophically when Nicholas assumed personal command of the army in 1915, despite lacking any military expertise. Under his leadership, Russia suffered 2,800,000 casualties by 1916, with defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes decimating morale. The Brusilov offensive of 1916, while initially successful, exhausted Russia's remaining resources and cost 500,000 Russian lives without securing lasting gains. Wartime expenditures consumed 80% of the state budget by 1917, diverting funds from critical infrastructure and social programs. The government's decision to print unbacked currency led to hyperinflation, with prices for basic goods rising 400%, while wages stagnated. Food shortages became endemic after the military requisitioned 30% of railway capacity for troop transports, paralyzing grain shipments to cities. By February 1917, Petrograd's daily bread ration fell to 300 grams per person, sparking mass protests that would soon engulf the capital. The emancipation of serfs in 1861 had created a landless peasant class, increasingly drawn to revolutionary ideologies, with 1,500 agrarian uprisings recorded between 1914 and 1917. Industrial workers faced 14-hour shifts in factories operating at wartime capacity, while safety regulations were ignored, leading to frequent accidents. The Lena massacre of 1912, where troops killed 270 striking gold miners, exemplified the regime's brutal response to labor disputes. Nicholas II's dissolution of the Duma in 1915 and reliance on reactionary advisors like Pyotr Stolypin exacerbated political tensions. Stolypin's agrarian reforms increased agricultural output by 30%, but failed to address systemic inequality, as wealthy kulaks consolidated land at the expense of the rural poor. The Tsarina Alexandra's German heritage during wartime and her dependence on Grigory Rasputin, who influenced ministerial appointments, fueled suspicions of treason and incompetence. When strikes erupted in Petrograd in February 1917, Nicholas dismissed warnings as nonsense and ordered troops to fire on protesters. This triggered the February Revolution as 170,000 soldiers mutinied and joined the insurgents against their officers. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918 would cede 34% of Russia's population and 89% of its coal fields to Germany, a national humiliation. The Bolsheviks capitalized on war weariness, promoting slogans like "Peace Land Bread" to undermine provisional government legitimacy. The Romanovs' inability to adapt to 20th century political currents, including rising socialism and nationalism, left them isolated from all social classes. Even conservative elites withdrew support after the July Days massacre of 1917, recognizing the dynasty's irreversible collapse. Russia's earlier agrarian economy, reliant on outdated feudal practices, had collapsed under the dual pressures of war and catastrophic mismanagement. The Bloody Sunday massacre of 1905 remained fresh in popular memory, a reminder of the dynasty's willingness to slaughter its own subjects. By 1917, the Romanov dynasty that had ruled for 3 centuries found itself abandoned by army, aristocracy, and people alike. The stage was set for a reckoning that would transform not just the fate of one family, but the course of world history itself. Following his abdication on March 15, 1917, Nicholas II and his family endured escalating humiliation at the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. Their captors painted windows shut, conducted hourly room inspections, and reduced their rations to soldiers' black bread. Bolshevik guards circulated obscene drawings of the Tsarina and Rasputin, while nighttime shouts of "You're going to be killed" terrorized the family. On July 17, 1918, a firing squad led by Yakov Yurovsky executed the Romanovs in a basement room. Forensic analysis later revealed bayonet wounds on the daughters, suggesting some survived the initial gunfire before being brutally finished. The bodies were doused in sulfuric acid and buried in a mine shaft, their remains undiscovered until 1979. DNA analysis in 1991 and 2007 confirmed the identities of all 7 Romanovs, ending decades of speculation about survivors. The analysis debunked imposters like Anna Anderson, a Polish woman who claimed to be Anastasia for decades. Mitochondrial DNA matches with Prince Philip, a maternal relative of Alexandra, and heteroplasmy in Nicholas's remains provided irrefutable evidence. Despite scientific validation, the Russian Orthodox Church initially rejected the findings, delaying reburial until 1998 at St. Petersburg's Peter and Paul Cathedral. The 2007 discovery of Alexei and Maria's remains resolved lingering doubts, though the Church only recognized their authenticity in 2015. In 2000, the Romanovs were canonized as passion-bearers for their meekness during captivity, transforming failed rulers into martyrs. This religious rehabilitation coincided with Vladimir Putin's efforts to co-opt imperial symbolism, such as readopting the double-headed eagle coat of arms. Putin frames modern territorial expansion as a revival of Romanov-era glory, instrumentalizing their memory for contemporary political purposes. Monarchist movements like the Romanov Empire micronation advocate constitutional restoration, though they lack mainstream support in modern Russia. The Romanovs' opulent lifestyle, exemplified by Fabergé eggs and the reconstructed Amber Room, continues to fascinate millions at global exhibitions. Yet their rule remains contentious. While some view Nicholas as a martyr, historians highlight his 1905 Bloody Sunday massacre and systematic suppression of dissent. The Church on Blood, built on the Ipatiev house site, serves as a pilgrimage destination, blending religious veneration with dark tourism. Modern Russia's ambivalence toward the Romanovs reflects broader tensions between Soviet legacy and imperial nostalgia. As historian Simon Sebag Montefiore notes, the Romanovs haunt Russia like no other dynasty, a reminder of lost grandeur and the price of tyranny. Their story endures as a cautionary tale of autocratic hubris, immortalized in films and scholarly debates over what might have been had they embraced reform. From Andrei Kobylya's single mention in 14th century chronicles to DNA analysis confirming royal remains, the Romanov arc spans from obscurity to global fame. Their legacy oscillates between reverence and revisionism, a mirror for Russia's ongoing struggle to define itself. 3 centuries of absolute power, unlimited wealth and artistic genius created something extraordinary in Russia's imperial capitals, a world where architecture touched divinity and luxury knew no bounds. The Romanovs built their palaces not just as homes, but as statements to the world, crafting spaces where a single amber-covered room could cost more than a modern office tower. Through halls longer than Olympic pools and past fountains that danced without electricity, these residences witnessed history's most dramatic moments. Some chambers remain exactly as their last imperial occupants left them, frozen in time since revolution's thunder. Others required generations of modern masters to resurrect their splendor from war's ashes. In today's episode, we'll take you on a one-of-a-kind tour of their most opulent residences, starting with one of their best. Number 1. Winter Palace, St. Petersburg. At the pinnacle of Russian imperial might stands the Winter Palace, a colossal Baroque masterpiece that served as the official residence of Russian emperors from 1732 to 1917. Rising from the banks of the Neva River in St. Petersburg, this architectural triumph spans 233,345 square meters, encompassing 1,500 rooms that whisper tales of power, revolution, and dramatic social transformation. The palace reached its final magnificent form under Italian architect Bartolomeo Rastrelli, who completed his vision in 1762. Its monumental principal facade extends 215 meters, dominating Palace Square with an intricate display of Baroque artistry. The striking exterior, painted in rich shades of green and white, features elaborate stucco moldings, while 176 sculptured figures stand eternal watch along the roofline. Within its walls, a remarkable 1,886 doors and 1,945 windows create an intricate maze of imperial grandeur. The piano nobile, occupying the first floor, housed the principal staterooms and living quarters of the imperial family. Above, the second floor accommodated senior courtiers and high-ranking officials, maintaining strict hierarchical divisions that characterized court life. Each room tells its own story of power and prestige. The Jordan staircase, with its gilded carvings and marble steps, welcomed foreign diplomats and nobility. The Field Marshal's Hall displayed portraits of military heroes, while the Alexander Hall, dedicated to Emperor Alexander I, dazzled visitors with white columns and military trophies captured during the Napoleonic Wars. The Winter Palace witnessed pivotal moments that shaped Russia's destiny. Here, emperors proclaimed wars and negotiated peace. The first Russian State Duma opened within these walls in 1906, marking a brief experiment with parliamentary democracy. In 1914, Emperor Nicholas II stood on its balcony, rallying troops as they departed for World War I. Yet the palace's central location, while perfect for displays of imperial authority, eventually became a vulnerability. The events of Bloody Sunday in 1905, when peaceful protesters met with military force on Palace Square, marked a turning point. Later, Tsars increasingly sought refuge in more secluded residences, though the Winter Palace remained the official seat of power until 1917. In that fateful year, the palace became the stage for revolution. The provisional government's last stand occurred in its halls, and its fall to Bolshevik forces symbolized the end of 300 years of Romanov rule. Today, as part of the State Hermitage Museum, its rooms house one of the world's greatest art collections, allowing visitors to walk the same corridors where Russian emperors once shaped the fate of an empire spanning 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. For any explorer of Russian imperial heritage, the Winter Palace offers an unparalleled window into the grandeur and complexity of Romanov rule. Yet while this St. Petersburg icon may be the most famous of Russia's imperial residences, the Catherine Palace in nearby Tsarskoye Selo reveals an equally compelling story of royal ambition and artistic achievement. Number 2. Catherine Palace, Tsarskoye Selo. Rising from the grounds of Tsarskoye Selo, 30 kilometers south of St. Petersburg, the Catherine Palace emerged from modest beginnings to become one of Imperial Russia's most resplendent architectural achievements. What began in 1717 as a simple two-story building commissioned by Catherine I, wife of Peter the Great, evolved into a magnificent display of Russian Baroque splendor through successive imperial visions. The palace underwent its most dramatic transformation under Empress Elizabeth, daughter of Peter and Catherine. In 1752, she commissioned Bartolomeo Francesco Rastrelli to reimagine the structure entirely. Rastrelli's design produced an architectural masterpiece, its blue and white stucco facade adorned with a profusion of Atlantes, caryatids, and pilasters that created an unforgettable silhouette against the Russian sky. Inside, Rastrelli's genius manifested in 58 halls of increasing opulence. The golden enfilade, a succession of staterooms, exemplified the Rococo style at its zenith, with walls dressed in gold leaf and intricate stucco work that dazzled visitors and courtiers alike. Yet among these spectacular chambers, one room surpassed all others in its legendary status: the Amber Room, often celebrated as the eighth wonder of the world. Originally created for Prussia's Frederick I in the early 18th century and gifted to Peter the Great in 1716, the Amber Room represented the pinnacle of Baroque decorative arts. 6 tons of amber and semi-precious stones, backed with gold leaf, covered approximately 180 square feet of wall space, creating an amber-hued sanctuary valued at $142 million in today's currency. The palace's history took a dark turn during World War II. German forces, recognizing the Amber Room's cultural significance, dismantled it within 36 hours in 1941, packing its precious panels into 27 crates bound for Königsberg. The room's subsequent fate remains one of art history's greatest mysteries, last seen in Königsberg Castle in 1945, before vanishing into the fog of war. In 1979, Soviet authorities embarked on an ambitious project to recreate the Amber Room. This painstaking process, spanning 24 years and involving Russia's most skilled craftsmen, culminated in the room's triumphant reopening in 2003. The reconstructed chamber now stands as a brilliant testament to Russian craftsmanship and cultural perseverance. Today's visitors discover a palace that bridges multiple artistic epochs. Beyond Rastrelli's Baroque extravagance, they encounter the refined neoclassical interiors commissioned by Catherine the Great and executed by Scottish architect Charles Cameron. His agate rooms and the Cameron Gallery reflect Catherine's sophisticated taste and fascination with classical antiquity. While the Catherine Palace astounds visitors with its artistic treasures and imperial splendor, another remarkable Romanov residence beckons. The Peterhof Palace, with its spectacular fountains and gardens, presents an equally ambitious vision of royal power projected through architectural magnificence. Number 3. Peterhof Palace, St. Petersburg. Along the shores of the Gulf of Finland, 30 kilometers west of St. Petersburg, rises Peterhof Palace, Russia's bold response to the grandeur of Versailles. Commissioned in the early 18th century by Peter the Great, this magnificent complex emerged as a powerful statement of Russia's arrival on the European stage, combining regal splendor with engineering ingenuity. Construction began in 1714, culminating in a grand opening ceremony on the 15th of August, 1723. Peter the Great's personal involvement in the design process proved extensive, with over 10 of his handmade drawings and numerous annotated sketches surviving to this day. His vision transformed a coastal site into an imperial residence that would rival the greatest palaces of Europe. The Grand Palace, though imposing in appearance, maintains relatively modest proportions with approximately 30 rooms. Originally conceived as a two-story villa with side wings, it underwent significant expansion during Empress Elizabeth's reign. Italian architect Bartolomeo Rastrelli elevated the structure literally and figuratively, adding a third floor, new wing, and small dome church that defined its Baroque character. Within the palace walls, each room tells a story of evolving imperial tastes. Peter the Great's oak study remains preserved in its original state, offering intimate glimpses into the emperor's private world. The throne room, later enhanced by Yuri Felton during Catherine the Great's reign, spans an impressive 300 square meters, showcasing a gallery of Romanov portraits. The Chesma Hall displays 12 large paintings by Jacob Philip Hackett, commemorating Russia's naval triumph at the Battle of Chesma. Yet Peterhof's true marvel lies in its revolutionary fountain system. The lower park, designed in formal French style, features an astonishing network of 140 fountains operating entirely through natural gravity, an engineering feat conceived by Peter the Great himself. The Grand Cascade stands as the crown jewel, where 64 fountains and 200 bronze statues create a mesmerizing aquatic display. At its heart, the Samson Fountain depicts the biblical hero wrestling a lion's jaws apart, symbolizing Russia's victory over Sweden in the Great Northern War. Like many Russian imperial treasures, Peterhof suffered greatly during World War II under German occupation. However, dedicated restoration efforts began immediately after liberation, continuing through to the present day. In 1990, UNESCO recognized the palace's exceptional value by inscribing it on the World Heritage List. Modern visitors to Peterhof experience a harmonious blend of natural beauty, architectural achievement, and technological innovation. The palace grounds continue to demonstrate Peter the Great's vision of Russian power and sophistication, while the fountains perform their gravity-defying dance just as they did 3 centuries ago. While Peterhof dazzles with its outdoor spectacles and formal grandeur, the Alexander Palace presents a more intimate side of imperial life, where the last Romanovs sought refuge from the pressures of rule. Number 4. Alexander Palace, Tsarskoye Selo. In the imperial compound of Tsarskoye Selo stands the Alexander Palace, a masterwork of Russian neoclassical architecture that would become the stage for the Romanov dynasty's final act. Commissioned by Catherine the Great in 1792 for her grandson, the future Emperor Alexander I, the palace rose swiftly from the ground, completed in just 4 years under the skilled direction of Italian architect Giacomo Quarenghi. Though Alexander I himself spent limited time within its walls after ascending to the throne, subsequent generations of Romanovs embraced the palace with increasing devotion. Nicholas I, in particular, poured resources into enhancing both the interiors and surrounding grounds, establishing the foundation for what would become a cherished family retreat. The palace reached its zenith of historical significance during the reign of Nicholas II. Following the tumultuous events of 1905 that shook imperial authority, Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna chose these halls as their permanent residence, valuing the relative seclusion compared to St. Petersburg's more exposed Winter Palace. The imperial couple reshaped their surroundings to match their tastes, notably transforming the former 2-story ballroom into the Maple Room and the new study. Perhaps most striking were the changes introduced by Empress Alexandra, who collaborated with architect Meltzer to incorporate Art Nouveau elements throughout the interiors. This decision sparked controversy among conservative courtiers who viewed the modern style as inappropriately bourgeois for imperial quarters. Their protests went unheeded as Alexandra created intimate spaces that reflected her personal aesthetic rather than traditional palatial grandeur. The Alexander Palace witnessed both the twilight of imperial rule and its final eclipse. After Nicholas II's abdication in February 1917, these same walls that had provided sanctuary became a gilded prison as the imperial family endured months of house arrest before their fateful transfer to Siberia. From these grounds began their last journey, ending in Yekaterinburg in July 1918. The decades following the revolution saw the palace serve various functions, from museum to orphanage, vacation retreat for NKVD workers, and even German military headquarters during World War II. Each iteration left its mark on the structure, contributing to its gradual decline until recent years brought renewal. August 2021 marked a new chapter as the Alexander Palace reopened to the public following extensive renovations. The first phase restored 13 rooms within the personal apartments of Nicholas I, Alexandra, and their children. These meticulously reconstructed interiors now display original furnishings and personal effects, offering visitors intimate glimpses into the private world of Russia's last imperial family. While the Alexander Palace reveals the personal side of imperial life, the Gatchina Palace presents yet another facet of Romanov rule, a unique blend of medieval fortress and classical palace that served as a sanctuary for Emperor Alexander III. Number 5. Gatchina Palace. Rising from Russian soil as a striking fusion of classical palace and medieval fortress, the Gatchina Palace emerged in 1766 under Catherine the Great's patronage. Initially constructed for her favorite, Count Grigory Orlov, the palace took shape through Italian architect Antonio Rinaldi's distinctive vision, blending European royal grandeur with robust Russian character. The palace's commanding presence stems from its unique architectural elements. Crafted from local Pudust limestone, the 3-story central building stands flanked by pentagonal towers, while semicircular galleries connect it to single-story service wings. This remarkable combination created an imperial residence that projected both elegance and strength across the surrounding landscape. Following Orlov's death in 1783, Catherine II repurchased the estate, presenting it to her son, the future Emperor Paul I. Under Paul's direction, the palace underwent substantial transformation. Architect Vincenzo Brenner enhanced its fortress-like qualities, reflecting the emperor's military interests and creating a structure that symbolized both imperial power and defensive might. The 19th century brought waves of change to Gatchina. Emperor Nicholas I initiated major reconstruction efforts in the 1840s, engaging architect Roman Ivanovich Kuzmin. These renovations elevated the main square, added basement levels, and updated decorative elements to align with contemporary tastes. Yet it was Emperor Alexander III who truly made Gatchina his own, transforming it into the primary imperial residence following his father's assassination in 1881. Under Alexander III's reign, Gatchina earned its reputation as the citadel of autocracy. The emperor modernized the palace extensively, introducing indoor heating, electric lighting, telephone networks, and advanced plumbing systems. His passion for hunting influenced the palace's character, particularly visible in the arsenal room and bare staircase, where impressive trophies adorned the walls. The palace's significance extended beyond its walls, as Gatchina effectively became the Russian Empire's de facto capital during Alexander III's reign. The surrounding town expanded rapidly, accommodating an influx of courtiers, officials, and military officers. The extensive English landscape park provided space for royal entertainments, from hunting expeditions to winter sporting activities like skiing and sledding. The future Nicholas II spent his formative years at Gatchina, growing up in the relatively modest private apartments of his parents. These rooms, preserved today, offer striking contrast to the palace's grand state chambers, revealing the private face of imperial life. The juxtaposition of formal splendor and family intimacy creates a unique window into the complex world of Russian royalty. Today, Gatchina Palace stands as a museum and UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserving centuries of imperial history within its limestone walls. Visitors explore the staterooms of Paul I and Maria Feodorovna, the private quarters of later Tsars, and exhibitions chronicling the palace's pivotal role in Russian history. Through its halls echo the footsteps of emperors who shaped an empire, each leaving their mark on this remarkable blend of fortress and palace. Today, 3 million pieces of human genius rest within seafoam green walls stretching longer than 2 football fields. Rembrandt masterpieces catch the light streaming through 2,000 windows. A mechanical golden peacock still marks time in perfect silence, just as it has for centuries. This is the Winter Palace of St. Petersburg, where precious stones line entire rooms, where the world's oldest carpet tells tales of ancient kings, and where even the doorknobs once required white gloves to polish. But on a bitter December night in 1837, this treasure house of civilization was transformed into an inferno that lit up the Russian sky. As temperatures plunged to -30 degrees, firefighters watched helplessly as their water turned to sheets of ice before it could reach the flames. Inside, priceless artwork melted, floors collapsed, and 3 centuries of imperial splendor seemed destined to vanish into ash. What happened next would defy everything we think we know about human capability. In today's episode, we share not just the story of a palace that burned. We tell the tale of how an emperor's impossible demand launched one of the most ambitious architectural restorations ever attempted, as we describe why Europe's most opulent palace almost burned to the ground. In 1754, amid the frozen grandeur of St. Petersburg, Empress Elizabeth of Russia began construction on a palace that would come to symbolize Russian imperial might for centuries. The Italian architect Bartolomeo Rastrelli was commissioned to create a Baroque masterpiece that would establish St. Petersburg as one of Europe's most impressive capitals. The result would be the Winter Palace, whose distinctive green and white facade would stretch 215 meters along the Neva River. The Winter Palace had already seen several iterations before reaching its iconic form. Peter the Great had established the first winter residence on this site in 1708, but subsequent rulers had gradually expanded and transformed it. Rastrelli's design would dwarf all previous versions, creating a structure of unprecedented scale and grandeur that perfectly embodied the growing power of Imperial Russia. The statistics of the new palace spoke to its immensity. More than 1,000 rooms, 117 staircases, and nearly 2,000 windows, letting in precious light during St. Petersburg's dark winters. The exterior was a masterwork of Baroque architecture, with its rhythmic facade combining Russian and European artistic traditions in a display of architectural virtuosity that announced Russia's arrival as a European power. As construction neared completion in 1762, Catherine the Great ascended to the throne, marking the beginning of a new era for the palace. Though she removed Rastrelli from the project, Catherine would transform the Winter Palace and its surrounding complex into one of the world's greatest centers of art and culture. Under her direction, it evolved beyond a mere royal residence to become a legendary repository of artistic treasures. The interiors reflected the pinnacle of 18th-century craftsmanship and luxury. The state gala staircase served as the ceremonial entrance, its magnificent decorations setting the tone for the splendor that awaited within. The staterooms dazzled visitors with their opulent decoration, while the private apartments provided comfort for the imperial family and their closest courtiers. Military glory and artistic refinement intertwined within these walls. The War Gallery of 1812 would later display 332 portraits of generals who fought against Napoleon, while the palace complex expanded to include 3 adjoining buildings collectively known as the Hermitage, housing Catherine's growing art collection that would form the nucleus of one of the world's most prestigious museums. The palace complex functioned as a city unto itself, housing not only the imperial family, but also hundreds of servants, officials, and guards. Every corner of the vast structure served a purpose, from the grand state rooms where empires were governed to the countless service areas that kept the massive household running smoothly. By the early 19th century, the Winter Palace stood as the very heart of the Russian Empire. Every significant moment in the life of the imperial family and the state was marked within its walls. Grand balls, diplomatic receptions, royal weddings, and state funerals all unfolded in its magnificent halls. Yet this symbol of imperial power would face an unprecedented challenge in the winter of 1837, when a catastrophic fire threatened to erase decades of architectural and artistic achievement. On the 17th of December, 1837, as winter's grip held St. Petersburg, smoke began pouring from the Winter Palace. The fire, which began in the Field Marshal Hall, would develop into one of the most catastrophic palace fires in European history. The blaze, later traced to defective chimney flues near wooden partitions, found ready fuel in the building's extensive wooden interiors, the framework that supported its magnificent facades and grand halls. Emperor Nicholas I had been attending a performance at the Mikhailovsky Theatre when word of the fire reached him. Upon arrival at the palace, he immediately took command of the emergency response, demonstrating the hands-on leadership style for which he was known. The emperor moved through the increasingly dangerous areas of the palace, directing both the firefighting effort and the desperate race to save the building's priceless contents. The bitter winter conditions complicated the rescue efforts enormously. The freezing temperatures turned the firefighters' water into sheets of ice almost instantly upon contact with the building. What began as an attempt to quench the flames inadvertently created hazardous conditions, as water froze on stairs and balconies, turning evacuation routes into treacherous paths. The soldiers of the Preobrazhensky Guards Regiment emerged as the heroes of the night. Working with remarkable efficiency, they methodically evacuated precious artifacts, furniture, and imperial treasures from the burning palace. The portraits from the Military Gallery of 1812, celebrating the generals who had fought against Napoleon, were among the countless treasures saved from the advancing flames, while the palace's magnificent fixtures and furnishings were rushed to safety. As the night wore on, the fire reached its terrifying apex. The inferno created its own terrible spectacle, drawing thousands of St. Petersburg's citizens to Palace Square despite the bitter cold. Flames shot skyward from the palace roof, casting an apocalyptic glow over the city centre that could be seen from miles away. The intense heat shattered windows across the square and melted snow on neighbouring buildings. Inside, floors collapsed as fire consumed the wooden structural elements, sending burning debris cascading through the palace's interior. In a remarkable display of civic unity, local citizens joined the soldiers in their rescue efforts. The nearby Hermitage buildings became impromptu warehouses for evacuated artifacts, while the palace's vaulted stone cellars protected what couldn't be moved. Through these combined efforts, an astounding portion of the palace's movable heritage survived, even as the building itself suffered devastating damage. By daybreak on December 18th, the fire had gutted much of the palace interior. The once resplendent staterooms stood as hollow shells, their ornate decorations reduced to ashes or warped beyond recognition. Multiple sections of the roof had caved in, and many of the palace's structural elements had been severely compromised by the intense heat and flames. Yet even as smoke still rose from the ruins, Emperor Nicholas I made a declaration that would define both his reign and the palace's future. Standing amid the devastation, he announced that the Winter Palace would be fully restored to its former glory within 15 months. This bold proclamation would launch one of the most ambitious architectural restoration projects ever attempted, testing the limits of human ingenuity, engineering capability, and sheer determination in a race against time. Emperor Nicholas I's declaration that the Winter Palace must be restored within 1 year set in motion one of the most remarkable construction projects of the 19th century. In the wake of the devastating fire, work began immediately to restore the imperial residence to its former glory. The project's scale was unprecedented. An entire palace had to be rebuilt while preserving its historic character and architectural integrity. The restoration effort commenced even as the ruins still smouldered. Workers began clearing debris and assessing the extent of the damage, while architects and engineers developed plans for the massive undertaking ahead. The winter weather posed significant challenges, but the urgency of the emperor's deadline meant work had to proceed despite the harsh conditions. Under the supervision of architects Vasily Stasov and Alexander Bruilov, the restoration project took shape. These talented architects brought their considerable expertise to bear on the immense challenge of rebuilding the palace while maintaining its historic character. Their combined knowledge of the palace's original design and construction proved invaluable in guiding the restoration process. The rebuilding of the Winter Palace became a matter of national importance. The project drew upon the vast resources of the Russian Empire, mobilizing materials and expertise on an unprecedented scale. The restoration required not only rebuilding the basic structure, but also recreating the intricate decorative elements that had made the Winter Palace one of Europe's most impressive royal residences. Throughout 1838, work on the palace proceeded at an intense pace. The project demanded extraordinary coordination and planning to manage the various aspects of reconstruction simultaneously. From structural repairs to decorative finishing, every element of the restoration required careful attention to detail and precise execution to meet the emperor's demanding timeline. The restoration effort focused not only on rebuilding the palace's structure, but also on recreating its lavish interiors. The staterooms, which had been the setting for countless imperial ceremonies and events, needed to be restored to their former magnificence. This involved the painstaking work of recreating decorative elements and finishes that had been destroyed in the fire. As the work progressed, the palace gradually began to reclaim its former splendor. Room by room, the restoration revealed the grandeur that had made the Winter Palace the center of imperial Russian life. The project demonstrated the empire's ability to marshal its resources and expertise for a task of enormous complexity and scale. By spring 1839, slightly more than a year after the fire, the Winter Palace stood restored. Though the project had extended somewhat beyond Nicholas III's original one-year deadline, the achievement was nonetheless remarkable. The restored palace served as a monument of Russian determination and skill, preserving one of the empire's most significant monuments for future generations. The Winter Palace would continue its role as both the official residence of the Russian emperors and a symbol of imperial power and cultural achievement. Following its restoration in 1839, the Winter Palace continued its role as both the official residence of the Russian imperial family and the grandest expression of Russian state power. The palace complex had already begun its transformation into a public cultural institution when, in 1852, the first public museum opened in the adjoining Hermitage buildings. This marked the beginning of a gradual evolution from private imperial collection to public institution. The Winter Palace witnessed another pivotal moment in Russian history on the 7th of November, 1917, October 25th, in the old Julian calendar, during the Bolshevik Revolution. The palace, which then housed the provisional government that had ruled Russia since the February Revolution, fell to the Bolsheviks without the dramatic storming often depicted in revolutionary mythology. Instead, a small group of Red Guards entered the palace and arrested the ministers of the provisional government, marking the end of the imperial era that had defined the building for so long. In the years following the revolution, the palace complex underwent a gradual transformation. The Hermitage, already established as a state museum, began to expand its presence within the Winter Palace itself. The process of converting imperial spaces into public galleries proceeded steadily as the Soviet government worked to transform this symbol of monarchy into an institution of public education and cultural heritage. The staterooms that had once hosted imperial ceremonies found new purpose as galleries, their elaborate decorations now providing a historical context for the display of art. The integration of the Winter Palace into the museum complex represented a significant shift in Russian cultural life, as spaces once reserved for the elite became accessible to the general public. During World War II, as German forces threatened Leningrad, the palace and its collections faced a new crisis. Museum staff began evacuating the Hermitage's treasures even before the siege began, sending items not only to the Urals but to various secure locations. Yet even during the devastating 872-day siege of Leningrad, the palace remained a center of cultural life. Its massive cellars served as bomb shelters, while the building housed both people and cultural activities throughout the ordeal, maintaining a flame of civilization in the besieged city. The post-war decades brought both restoration and change to the Winter Palace. While efforts were made to preserve the palace's historic character, the Soviet period saw varying approaches to the building's conservation and use. Some areas received careful restoration, while others experienced periods of neglect or adaptation to different purposes, reflecting the complex relationship between Soviet ideology and imperial heritage. Today's Winter Palace stands as a symbol of centuries of Russian history and culture, as it forms the core of the State Hermitage Museum, one of the world's largest and most renowned cultural institutions. The museum complex, which includes several adjacent buildings, houses an astounding collection of over 3 million items spanning the breadth of human cultural achievement. Within its walls, visitors discover prehistoric treasures such as the world's oldest surviving knotted pile carpet from the Pazyryk culture, alongside classical antiquities featuring Greek, Roman, and Hellenistic sculptures and artifacts. The palace's galleries showcase an extensive collection of Western European art, including masterpieces by Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, and Picasso. Among its most remarkable treasures is the Golden Peacock Clock by James Cox, a marvel of 18th century craftsmanship. The museum also holds a significant collection of Dutch Golden Age and Flemish Baroque paintings, representing one of the finest such collections in existence. Additionally, visitors today can explore magnificent spaces such as the Jordan Staircase, St. George's Hall, and the Malachite Room, each chamber telling its own story of Russia's imperial past. As millions cross its threshold each year, they walk the same halls where Russian history pivoted from monarchy to museum, and where treasures once reserved for emperors now belong to everyone.